Hey guys, welcome back to Global Gardens. Today we are going to talk about this upcoming season, winter. If you were to describe winter using one word, what word would you use? Go ahead, pause this video, raise your hand, and give me a few words that you would use to describe winter. A few words that I thought of was chilly or cold, dark because the sun sets super early. I thought of snow. I thought of Christmas. My favorite holiday is in winter. So all of these things about winter is true. In winter it gets colder and the sun sets quicker. Today we are going to talk about what animals do in winter, and we're going to read this book, Animals in Winter. Dun dun dun. The days grow short and the nights grow long. It is getting colder. Winter is coming. Leaves have fallen from the trees. There are no berries on the bushes. Insects are gone. The grass is dead and brown. Birds and other animals are getting ready for winter. Some of the birds will fly south. Bluebirds and orioles go towards the south. They go where it's warm and sunny and where there's food for them to eat. When spring comes, the birds will make the long journey back north. They migrate. Some butterflies migrate too. That is what monarch butterflies do. They gather in a tree by the hundreds before cold winter comes. They stay in that tree all night. In the morning, they fly towards their winter homes in the south. In the south, it's going to be a little bit warmer than it is in the north. So they'll stay there for the winter and then come back in the spring. Many bats fly south too, but some bats stay in the north all winter long. And when weather gets cold, they go to a cave. There is no wind or snow in the cave, and the bats will sleep there all winter. Those bats, they don't eat. They live on fat stored inside of them. They do not move. They hardly breathe. They sleep, sleep, sleep. They are hibernating. Woodchucks hibernate too. When fall comes, a woodchuck eats and eats and eats and eats. He eats grass and twigs and leaves, and he grows fat. When it gets cold, the woodchuck crawls into his long tunnel and goes to sleep. Does the woodchuck sleep for one day? No, longer than that. Does he sleep for a week? No, longer than that. A month? Even longer. The woodchuck can sleep for 4 months. That's a long time. So starting in December, he is going to go to sleep. So December, January, February, March, he will wake up in April. Imagine how crazy his bed hair would look. The woodchuck seems hardly alive. He breathes very slowly. His heart beats slowly. He sleeps, sleeps, sleeps. He hibernates. Some animals do not hibernate. They gather food and save it for winter. This is what a pika does. A pika looks like a little rabbit, but with round ears. Pikas live high in the mountains where winters are long and cold. They eat grass. In summer, they cut more grass than they can eat, and they spread it on the flat stones to dry. Then, after the pika has gathered 50 pounds of grass, she hides it under rocks. In winter, she eats the dry grass, and it keeps her alive. Squirrels gather food too, and they save it for winter. They dig holes in the ground. They bury hickory nuts and acorns. When winter comes, the squirrels dig them up and eat them. But sometimes squirrels forget where they buried their nuts, and trees may grow from the nuts that they forgot. Some animals do not get ready for winter at all. They do not store food. They do not hibernate. They do not migrate. They must hunt for food all winter long. Deer also do not store food. They must dig in the snow for dried leaves, plants, and moss. When the snow is deep, they must eat twigs and buds and the bark of trees. The rabbit also must hunt under the snow for bits of grass and plants. And when the snow is deep, he too eats the buds and bark of bushes so he can stay alive. In the winter, the fox hunts for mice and rabbits. This fox has discovered a mouse in its tunnel beneath the snow. Eventually, the days grow longer and the nights grow shorter. It begins to get warmer. That is how we know spring is coming. So this book just taught us about all the things animals do in order to prepare for the winter. We talked about 4 different things animals do. Some animals do something called migrate. That means they move from one place to go live in another. They have to travel to a new home for winter. Other animals store food for winter, like squirrels. They find all those nuts and then they bury them in the ground because they're going to eat them later that winter. Other animals, like foxes or mice, don't do anything for winter. They have to hunt and look for food all winter long. And lastly, we learned about animals that hibernate. And these are the type of animals that we're going to talk about today. So, what does it mean to hibernate? Hibernation is how some animals survive over winter. In winter, there is less food for animals to eat, and it's really chilly. So the animals hibernate. This means that during fall, they eat a ton of food. Then all winter long, they're going to hide somewhere deep and warm and cozy, and they're going to sleep. And they don't do like a normal type of sleep, but they're going to sleep for up to 4 months long. Think of how crazy your bedhead would look if you slept for 4 months long. Your hair would look so crazy. It would be like crazy hair day at school, but for real. So, our animals sleep for 4 months long, but it's not a normal kind of sleep. In these sleeps, animals are barely breathing. It's like they breathe like this. So they breathe a tiny bit. And what also happens is everyone feel your heart rate. You can feel your heart if you hold your fingers here or if you hold your fingers on your wrist. Can you feel that bump? That bump you feel is your heart. It's your heart beating and it's your heart sending blood. So for us, we have a pretty fast heart rate. Mine is going bump, 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 bump. For animals, when they're hibernating, it goes super slow. So it's going to be more like bump, 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 like so slow. So when animals are hibernating, they breathe really slowly. Their heart rate is really low and their body temperature is really cold. So normally, if you feel your cheeks or your neck, you feel pretty warm, right? And animals are the same way. Most animals are warm-blooded, which means they're going to always feel pretty warm. But in winter, those animals, their temperature drops and they are almost freezing. Their body temperatures are so low. That way, their body isn't using up all their food or all their energy to maintain their body heat. Instead, they're just really cold. And they're sleeping, and they're not eating. They don't move. They just stay there. You would almost think that they might be dead, but they're not. They're just sleeping. They're hibernating. So, when will those animals wake up? How do those animals know when to wake up? Go ahead and answer those questions with your class. When will they wake up, and how do they know when to wake up? Internal clock on their insides. Think about it like this. Is there a certain time of day when you get hungry? Is it around breakfast, lunch, or dinner time? Yeah. So you have an internal clock that is keeping track of when you eat food. And if you don't feed yourself at lunchtime, you're going to get hungry. That's like your internal clock saying, hey, it's lunchtime, why aren't you eating? So instead of having an internal clock to tell us when to eat, animals who are hibernating have an internal clock that tells them when to wake up. Hibernating animals' internal clock will be set to the number of days that they're going to hibernate. So some animals have a shorter time that they hibernate, some have a longer time, but that internal clock is going to wake them up when the time comes. Some signals that internal clock might receive could be the weather being warmer outside or the sun being in the sky for longer, right? Because in winter, the sun is only in the sky for a little bit of time. We have shorter days and longer nights. And when it gets warm, we have longer days and shorter nights. Let's practice what hibernation is like for animals. When I say fall, I need you to pretend to eat a ton of food. When I say winter, you need to pretend that you're sleeping. So curl up and sleep. Remember, you have to be really quiet and make as little movements as possible because animals who are hibernating barely move and they barely breathe. They're just sleeping. So when we say fall, we're going winter. And then in spring, you can wake up like this. Because animals wake up in the spring. Because why? It's warmer. The daylight is longer. This means there's going to be more food for them to eat. Okay, so let's practice. Remember, fall, winter, and spring. All right, you guys ready? Everyone show me what fall looks like for hibernating animals. What does winter look like for hibernating animals? What does spring look like for hibernating animals? Good. Oh, that's making me sleepy. Okay, so in fall, what are the animals doing? They're eating lots of food, getting fat. They are making a big storage of fat or blubber in their bodies so that it'll help keep them warm. And that way, even though they don't eat all those months long, their body will eat those fat stores away. And so they're eating a ton of food beforehand so that their bodies have something to eat later. Okay, so in fall, they're eating a ton of food. In winter, they sleep. And in spring, their internal clock says, hey, time to wake up. And so they wake up and they're so excited because it's nice and sunny outside. And soon there'll be lots of food for them to eat. Awesome job, guys. So, who knows what animals hibernate? Can anyone raise your hand and tell me some animals that might hibernate? Yeah, animals that hibernate include bears, it includes bats, it includes skunks, it includes snails, snakes. Did you know even kangaroo hibernate? Isn't that crazy? I love that. Another animal that hibernates is one of my favorite. Bees hibernate over winter. Think about it. Have any of you guys ever seen a bee buzzing around when it's snowing outside? I haven't. That's because in winter, all the worker bees in a hive, they all die. But the queen bee is alive, and the queen bee is going to find and dig her way underneath the leaves, and she's going to sleep all winter long. And when her alarm clock goes off, she will wake up and build a whole new colony. And this is awesome because then they can go back to pollinating all of our plants and our flowers, which we need in order for our gardens to happen. So bees are super important, and it's really cool that they hibernate. Another really fun animal that hibernates that I never knew before is frogs. Did you guys know frogs hibernate? Yeah. So we have a couple different types of frogs. Some frogs like to live in the water, and some frogs like to live more on the land. Those frogs that live in the water, often they're going to be bullfrogs. They hibernate in the mud at the very bottom of the pond. And you might be like, Miss Kaylee, if they're in the pond all winter long, how are they going to breathe? And this is the crazy part. Normally, frogs breathe in and out of their mouth and their nose, kind of like people. But when they're in water, they can breathe through their skin. And they take in oxygen from the water and they use that to breathe, and then they let off the carbon dioxide. So frogs, when they're hibernating, they bury into the mud, and then while they're sleeping, they're just breathing through their skin. They're just breathing in oxygen, breathing out carbon dioxide, and they just live life. When their internal time clock goes off, they're going to wake up and do their froggy thing, and it's awesome. Why do you think we're talking about frogs? Why are frogs important? Well, frogs are really helpful in the garden because they eat garden pests. They eat mosquitoes, and they eat little bugs that might end up eating our plants. So we really like frogs. But do all the frogs live in a pond or by a pond? No. So where do you think those frogs might hibernate? Go ahead and raise your hand and answer this. Where do frogs who don't live by a pond, where do you think they would hibernate? Frogs that don't live by a pond are going to hibernate by burying themselves in the leaves, in a bush. They might hide in a hole that they find, somewhere that's dark and cozy and hopefully warm and dry. All animals that hibernate like to find a place that's warm, dry, and doesn't let the air or the snow or the wind in. They like to be somewhere that's warm and cozy. Don't you like to sleep somewhere that's warm and cozy? Animals are the same way. Your guys' challenge today is to pretend that you're a hibernating animal and in your house, build your very own hibernation den. So you might want to use blankets, you might want to use pillows, and then once you've made it, you're going to want to crawl inside and pretend that you're a hibernating animal. Good luck, guys. Excited to see what kind of forts or dens that you build. I'll see you guys later. Have a good rest of your day.